You see them all the time, right? These giant metal birds just slicing through the sky. But have you ever really, truly stopped and thought about how a 400-ton airplane actually flies? I mean, it seems so simple, like something we all learned in grade school. But what if I told you the truth is, it's one of the most fiercely debated mysteries in all of modern physics?
No, really, think about it for a second. We're talking about hundreds of tons of metal, cargo, fuel, and people, just floating miles above the Earth. How in the world is that possible? The force required for that is just absolutely immense. And whatever the explanation is, it has to be rock solid, right?
Well, get this. This quote, which our source attributes to Scientific American, kind of blows the whole thing wide open. This isn't settled science, not by a long shot. It's an active, honest-to-goodness enigma. And today, we're going to dive into one of the most provocative, most out-there answers to this mystery you've probably ever heard. Okay, so before we get to this wild new theory, we first have to understand why its author thinks the explanations we all grow up with are, well, just plain wrong. So let's kick things off with the most famous textbook explanation of them all.
You know the one I'm talking about? The Bernoulli principle thing. The idea is that air splits at the front of the wing, right? And the air that goes over the longer, curved top surface has to speed up to meet its little air buddy from the bottom at the exact same time. But the author of this theory says, nope. He points to wind tunnel photos that show it's just not true. The air on top moves so much faster, it gets to the back way ahead of the air from the bottom. They don't meet up at all. And the hits just keep on coming. He points out a bunch of other problems. For one, those textbook diagrams, they often cheat by drawing the wing already tilted up. And then there's inverted flight. How does a plane fly upside down if the shape is so important? The theory also suggests that there should be this constant downward twisting force, a torque, that would want to push the plane's nose down all the time. But maybe the biggest nail in the coffin? He says the pressure difference you can calculate is just way, way too small to lift a massive jet off the runway. The numbers just don't add up.
So what about the old angle of attack argument? You know, the idea that lift comes from just tilting the wing up into the wind? Well, the author calls this a dodge. Why? Because planes generate lift when they're flying perfectly level. They even generate lift when they're in a shallow descent. If lift only came from tilting the wing up, a descending plane should just fall out of the sky. So if these theories we've trusted for decades have all these pretty significant holes, there's got to be something else going on, something big that we're missing from the picture. So what on earth could it be? And this, my friends, is where things get really wild. This is the core of the author's entire theory. He proposes that we're not just getting a principle of physics wrong, we're missing a fundamental force of nature entirely. He calls it the charge field. The idea is that the Earth itself is constantly shooting out this stream of what he calls charge photons. These are fundamental particles of this hidden force, and they're all flowing straight up, away from the ground. So this creates this universal, constant upward push against gravity, everywhere on the planet. Think of it like a kind of baseline buoyancy for, well, for everything. Now, according to the source, this field is just strong enough to constantly counteract about 0.1% of gravity's pull. And he argues it's this gentle, constant upward push that actually keeps our entire atmosphere from collapsing in on us. But wait a minute, if it's such a tiny force, how could it possibly lift an entire airplane?
Well, the secret ingredient, the key to the whole thing, is speed. And to explain it, the author uses this really clever and simple analogy that's based on a classic riddle.
Okay, picture this. You're caught in the rain for exactly 1 minute, no umbrella. Do you get wetter if you just stand still, if you walk, or if you run? The answer is running, right? And why is that? Because when you run forward, you're not just getting hit by the rain from above, you're colliding with all the raindrops in front of you. You simply encounter more of the rain field every second. He applies this exact same logic to his charge field. So, an object just sitting on the ground gets that tiny, constant push up. But an airplane, moving at hundreds of miles per hour, is slicing horizontally through huge areas of this upward flowing field every single second. It's colliding with exponentially more of these rising charge photons than it would if it were just sitting still. So here it is, the whole mechanism in a nutshell. The thrust from the engines doesn't create lift directly. No, it creates speed. That speed allows the wings to interact with a much, much greater volume of this upward charge field every second. And that multiplied interaction, that's what generates the massive force that we call lift.
It's like a chain reaction. So, if you start looking at flight through this new lens, the author argues that a lot of other weird aerodynamic puzzles suddenly start to make a whole lot more sense. Let's see how this idea reframes a couple of familiar concepts. Okay, so this theory changes everything. Take buoyancy, for example. The author says it has nothing to do with pressure differences in a fluid. It's the charge field itself holding the atmosphere up. And what about ground effect? That extra bit of lift a plane gets when it's close to the runway? He claims it's not a cushion of trapped air. Instead, it's some kind of electromagnetic interaction between the plane and the charge field being blasted out of the Earth right below it. And to back all this up, the author points to some pretty curious and interesting phenomena. He talks about things like historical aircraft from World War II that use copper cladding, or very specific kinds of wood for their wings, suggesting maybe these materials could block or redirect this charge field to get more lift. He even brings up things like reports of spinning gyroscopes losing weight, or lab experiments showing levitation, all as potential breadcrumbs leading to this hidden force. Ultimately, the author's whole argument kind of comes down to this one pretty bold quote. It's a direct challenge. He's suggesting that for all of its incredible power, modern physics might have completely lost its way when it comes to some of the most basic, observable things in our world. And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? Is lift just a simple matter of air pressure and angles, with a few details we still need to iron out? Or could the real secret to flight be something much more profound, an invisible force rising up from the very ground beneath our feet?